Chapter 122. Wake Him Up. Nan honestly looked quite scary, like he was possessed. After about 10 minutes, his arms reached forward once more to try to push himself up. After several failures, Nan finally managed to sit up. His eyes were fully white, and Nan sat on the bed, his head slightly lowered. Dr. Gao. Has he woken up? Chen Gei and Dr. Gao were standing about 1 meter away from Nan, but the young man did not seem to notice them as his eyes stared forward. His pupils were rolled back to his head, so they could only see white of his eyes. Probably not. Dr. Gao signaled for Chen Gei to take a step back. Both of them leaned against the wall to avoid running into Nan. Then, is this sleepwalking? This was the first time Chen Gei had seen something so weird as well. Sleepwalking is a type of common sleep impediment, but if it was just pure sleepwalking, his pupils would not have rolled back so far. The two communicated softly. Nan sat on the bed for a while, and without warning, he slowly stood up. Should we wake him? Their original plan had been to wake Nan when he did anything weird, and this was already past the definition of something weird. No, if we wake him now, we might break his already fragile mind. Dr. Gao paused before adding, I've been watching Nan's face and following the changes to his expression. Even if we are forced to wake him, we should wait until there's a drastic change in his emotions. The two exited the bedroom and stood outside for observation. Nan stood beside his bed for a few minutes before slowly turning to face the living room. His head was still lowered and his eyes were open, but they were mostly white. In such a condition, he moved his legs to walk out of the bedroom. Chen Ge nudged Dr. Gao lightly. What is he doing now? I've treated a child who sleepwalked before. He suffered from slight OCD, and every night he fell asleep, he would spend more than half an hour fixing the mattress to make sure the 4 edges lined up perfectly. After he fell asleep, he would sleepwalk in the middle of the night to again fix the edges before going back to sleep. Dr. Gao looked at Nan, and his face was full of worry. That kind of sleepwalking that eventually returned to bed is not so bad. We're most afraid of sleepwalkers who attempt things that are unexpected. After Nan exited the bedroom, he did not stop or hesitate and head for the bathroom directly. The wooden door was pushed open, and without turning, he walked toward the mirror. The faucet was turned on, and the bathroom was soon filled with the sound of rushing water. Is he planning to wash his hair? Chen Gei looked at Dr. Gao, who looked back at him with equal shock. Don't look at me. This is the first time I've seen this as well. The sound of water intensified, and Chen Gei, as well as Dr. Gao, rushed to the bathroom. Nan, who stood before the sink, was slowly bending down, his head lowered, and they both caught a glimpse of Nan's upside-down face. Even then, his pupils were nowhere to be seen. His head touched the water, and Nan's expression finally changed. His face twitched slightly like he had seen something incredibly scary. Chen Gei quivered under his gaze. He turned back to look, but there was nothing inside the room. Has he spotted something in his dream? Reality and the dream are connected? Nan had once mentioned the man entered the room from outside and stood beside him. His hair was wet, and Nan masterfully grabbed the hair shampoo and squirted a generous amount on his head. He scrubbed his scalp mechanically, but his eyes were fixed in a certain direction. The shampoo slid down his hair, and he instinctively wanted to close his eyes when the shampoo reached his eyes. At that moment, various negative emotions like fear and panic all surfaced at once. Quick, wake him up! The moment Dr. Gao shouted this command, Nan reached out to strangle himself. The veins on his arms popped as he tried to snap his own neck. His body lost balance, and he collapsed to the floor, the shampoo and water splashing everywhere. Wake up! Nan! Dr. Gao and Chen Gei both tried to pry his arms away, but no matter how loud they yelled, the young man did not respond. He continued to strangle himself and tried to use his head to knock against the sink. Detain him! Dr. Gao had probably faced similar patients before. He expertly asked Chen Gei to hold Nan's upper body while he whipped out his belt to tie Nan's wrists together. Nan, this is Dr. Gao. After his hands were tied, Dr. Gao held Nan's head with his palm on his forehead to stop the young man from knocking his head into the wall. It's all right now. It's all right now. Dr. Gao's voice was gentle and kind. It had a trustworthy quality to it, but it did not seem to be at all effective on Men Nan. The young man's condition did not improve, but only got worse. He opened his jaws to bite at the people around him, and when that failed, he bit on his tongue and soon blood seeped out of his lips. "Get me the towel!" Before Dr. Gao shouted that command, Chen Gei had already stuck the towel into Men Nan's mouth. By then, Men Nan should have woken up already, but he had not. His pupils kept moving upward, and Chen Gei was suddenly reminded of something. He had seen the young man do the same thing before at the park. He's looking upwards. The thing is on his head. Chen Gei tried to grab above Men Nan's hair, but there was nothing there. "Let's get him onto the bed first." Dr. Gao also did not know what had happened in Men Nan's dream. Both he and Chen Gei cooperated to haul Men Nan off the floor. His hands were bound and a towel was stuck in his mouth. But Men Nan still tried his best to hurt himself. His head wiggled about violently. Chen Gei was afraid that he might knock into the mirror, so he walked forward to steady his head. But when he raised his head to look into the mirror, something shocking was reflecting in it. Chen Gei's pupils narrowed, and a man was lying on Men Nan's back in the mirror. The man was as thin as twig, but his face was uneven on both sides, like a line was split down the middle, and two faces were sewn together to form one. The man was strangling Men Nan's neck and attempting to enter his body, but another force from within, Men Nan, was stopping the monster, causing it to slow down. Both parties were fighting over Men Nan's body, and that was the main source of his pain. The sight in the mirror was scary, but Dr. Gao could not see it. Now, only Chen Gei could help Men Nan. When I left room 303, I saw a shadow escaping into the mirror. This monster is probably of the same type as the mirror monster that I've dealt with before, so breaking the mirror should be able to hurt it somewhat. Chen Gei did not discuss this with Dr. Gao. He took out his mallet and swung it at the mirror. The mirror pieces shot everywhere, and the sound shattered the night's silence. The whole building had probably heard that. As the mirror crumbled, Men Nan, who was trapped in the nightmare, finally showed signs of waking up. He screamed, and his pupils slowly returned to normal. At the same time, a shadow glided across the floor as if it was trying to escape. Chen Gei pushed Men Nan toward Dr. Gao, and he jumped up holding the mallet. By the time he exited the bathroom, the shadow had already reached the front door. Chen Gei picked up Xiao, who had gotten a little misshapen from being his sleep buddy, and threw her at the shadow. Chapter 123. Escape. The ragdoll stained with fake blood arced through the air before knocking into the shadow. Weirdly enough, when the formless shadow was hit, it stopped at the door, the doll biting on its arm. "Well done!" Chen Gei aimed his flashlight at the shadow. Under the bright light, the shadow started to twist, and its color dimmed. Without the refuge of the mirror, the monster was weaker than Chen Gei had expected. It abandoned part of its body and escaped into room 302. The parts that the monster abandoned soon disappeared. It was unclear whether it had dissolved into thin air or been eaten by Xiao. Eating these things appears to be beneficial to Xiao. Chen Gei placed Xiao into his pocket and used the mallet to bang on room 302's door lock. "Come out!" The old steel door shook, shedding dust and rust. Even the frame itself was shaking. The commotion was so loud that all the nearby tenants were alerted. The door to room 301 opened a sliver. "What is all this commotion about?" The middle-aged man roared with the beer bottle in his hand. But he did not step out completely from his room. The door to room 302 was suddenly pulled open from within, and the young man living in it held a cleaver in his hand and slashed at Chen Gei madly. The mirror monster has entered his body? The corridor was narrow, so there was only so much room for Chen Gei to maneuver. Chen Gei took a step back and realized that the door to the middle-aged man's room was open. He fell into it and slammed the door shut. The sound of a cleaver chopping on the door was eerie. The young man had completely lost his sanity. His eyes were filled with streaks of blood. His face was in a mad grimace, and he said no words, like all his energy was being channeled into cleaving the door of room 301. It felt like he was planning to chop Chen Gei into pieces. Then again, it was understandable. It had planned this for weeks, and finally, it had almost gotten into Men Nan's body, but was stopped by Chen Gei at the last minute. On top of that, it had lost parts of its body in the struggle. The corridor was filled with the sound of the cleaver slashing on the steel door. "What's going on?" The middle-aged man inside the room was stunned beyond belief. His calves weakened, and he collapsed onto the shoe racks. "Help me!" The room door was not locked, and the young man could have burst through at any moment. I'll call the police." The middle-aged man did not dare go near the door. He placed the bottle on the table and hurriedly went looking for the phone. In his hurry, he knocked over the empty bottles and they clattered noisily. "I said, come help me with the door." As the sound of the cleaver reverberated through the halls, the rooms lit up one after another, and many tenants leaned their heads out the door. In room 304, after Dr. Gao deposited Men Nan on the living room sofa, he heard Chen Gei's cries for help. He ran out of the room with a stool in his hand. The young man from room 302 had gone berserk. His focus was fully on Chen Gei. Dr. Gao made use of this opportunity to sneak up on him from behind. When he was 1 meter away from the man, he raised the stool to knock at the upper part of the young man's spine. Dr. Gao's target was probably the head, but for some reason, his aim was off. The young man lost his balance and staggered forward, his body knocking into the door. Gripping the cleaver, his neck twisted unnaturally around, and the young man glared at Dr. Gao with bloodshot eyes. A roar bubbled from his throat. As the young man planned to turn to attack Dr. Gao, Chen Gei saw this opportunity and kicked the door open. The door slammed into the man, and without giving him the chance to recover, Chen Gei picked up a bottle from the floor and swung it at the young man's head. The bottle shattered, and blood flowed down the man's head. Chen Gei charged forward and knocked into the young man, holding him down on the floor. Dr. Gao also ran forward to grab the cleaver away from the young man. The young man tried to resist until the other tenants also came out to help detain him. It was then that he finally gave up on his resistance. With his cheek pressed into the cement floor, the young man's eyes focused on Chen Gei, like he was trying to memorize Chen Gei's features. 3 minutes later, the young man's pupils rolled backwards, and he fell unconscious. At the same time, the young man's shadow that was reflected on the wall suddenly moved and dashed down the stairs. Many people present saw that, but before they could react, the shadow had disappeared into the night. What was that? Dr. Gao's eyes widened. Many strange things had happened that night. I'm not so sure. The vengeful eyes that the young man had shot Chen Gei before he fainted were very familiar. It reminded him of the haunted house's mirror monster. Could it be that both of them came from the same world inside the mirror? Chen Gei climbed up from the floor and was about to give chase when he stopped at the staircase. The landlady blocked the staircase with a stern face. Has this person been taken over by the monster? Chen Gei took several steps back. Then again, he was the cause of the problems that had happened that night at her apartment, so he was feeling rather unsettled. What are you guys up to so late at night? The landlady walked up to the 3rd floor, and a few of the elder tenants followed behind her. Just as Chen Gei was wondering what to say, the middle-aged man in room 301 ran out with his phone. He had been hiding in his room until then. "Sis, it feels like brother-in-law has returned," the man whispered into the landlady's ear. "Xiao Du in room 302 used the cleaver and attacked people indiscriminately. It was completely the same as brother-in-law's situation." When he said that, the tenants who had gathered around started to disperse. A few ran back into their rooms and locked the door tight. Wasn't everything going just fine? The landlady looked at the chaos in the 3rd-floor corridor. She had her brother carry the young man to the hospital while she moved to talk to Chen Gei and Dr. Gao. "We were merely defending ourselves. The kid from room 302 almost killed me." "I know." The landlady paused before saying directly, "I still need to rent this place. Making this more complicated than it is will not be good for business, so how about we let this be? I will pay the child's medical bills, and we will not get the police involved. The child is still young, and I don't want to ruin his future." Hearing the landlady, Chen Gei realized that she knew a thing or two about the secret in room 303, as well as the reason behind room 302's young man's madness. After balancing the pros and cons, Chen Gei realized there was no benefit to pressing this further. After all, he had completed the Black Phone's mission. Chen Gei discussed this with Dr. Gao, and both of them agreed with the landlady. After the landlady left, Dr. Gao returned to room 304 to look after Men Nan, while Chen Gei waited in the living room. He still had plenty of questions left for the young man.